The rain had been falling for hours. The kind that didn't roar or lash, but instead whispered along the pavement with a quiet persistence, like it was trying to wash something forgotten out of the night. I remember stepping out of the office with my backpack slung over one shoulder, the sky a dark, heavy blue, and thinking only about how much I wanted to go home, eat something warm, and lose myself in mindless television until I fell asleep. But fate rarely announces itself. It slips in through the cracks of ordinary nights, hides behind streetlights, nestles itself in the corners of moments you aren't paying attention to. And that night, fate was sitting on the sidewalk in the shape of a little boy who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. He was hunched beside a bus stop bench, arms wrapped tightly around a soaked backpack, hair falling across his face like dark strings of wet thread. Something about the stillness of his posture, shoulders trembling just enough to notice, made me stop walking. People passed him, a couple rushing with an umbrella, a man in a suit talking loudly into his phone, a delivery driver splashing water as he sped through a puddle. No one slowed, no one looked, and I realized with a small, uneasy twist in my gut that the only reason I noticed him was because he looked exactly like I used to look, cold, alone, hoping no one would notice and praying someone would. I approached slowly, not wanting to scare him. "Hey, buddy," I said, keeping my voice soft. He didn't lift his head. Rain collected in his hair and dripped onto his backpack. "Are you okay?" I asked. That question felt useless, even as I said it. No kid sitting alone in the rain at 10 p.m. was okay. But sometimes a child needs to hear the question before they can answer it. After a moment, he looked up, just slightly, just enough for me to see his eyes. They weren't wild or panicked. They were empty in the way that only kids who've learned to expect disappointment can be. Kids who've been taught that crying doesn't change anything. Kids like I used to be. "What's your name?" I asked. His lips parted but no sound came out. His throat bobbed as he swallowed something tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the rain. "Evan." The name hit me with a strange familiarity. Simple, soft, the kind of name you whisper into a blanket fort while telling secrets. "Hi, Evan," I said gently. "I'm Mark. Do you need help?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the fear, the calculation, the instinctive mistrust that children develop when adults have let them down too many times. Finally, he nodded. It was the smallest nod I'd ever seen, but it was enough. "Okay," I said. "Let's get out of the rain." I held out my hand, not touching him, just offering. He hesitated, then reached for it. His hand was ice. We walked under the closest awning, a closed flower shop with metal grates pulled down across its windows. The smell of damp petals lingered in the air. I crouched in front of him. "Evan, are you lost?" He shook his head. "Did something happen at home?" His eyes dropped to the ground. That was answer enough. I sighed softly. The streets were emptying as the night deepened, and every instinct in me screamed that I couldn't just leave him here. "Are you hungry?" I asked. He shrugged. I took that as a yes. There was a small 24-hour cafe 2 blocks away. I walked with him slowly, making sure he stayed beside me. The rain softened into mist. Inside the cafe, warm yellow lights reflected off polished wooden tables. Evan followed me to a booth in the corner, sliding into the seat like a child trying not to be noticed. A waitress brought us menus, but he didn't open his. "You can get whatever you want," I said. He hesitated, then pointed at the grilled cheese sandwich pictured on the back. When it arrived, he ate in small, cautious bites, like someone who'd learned food wasn't always guaranteed. As he ate, I watched him, his thin wrists, his damp sneakers, the way he flinched every time the door opened, as if expecting someone specific to come through it. "Evan," I said softly, "do your parents know where you are?" His chewing slowed. He shook his head. He didn't cry, not exactly, but his eyes glistened. I leaned forward. "Are you scared to go home?" This time he nodded, a single, tiny nod. My stomach turned. I had lived that nod once. I remembered hiding in the laundry room when my father came home in one of his moods. I remembered praying anyone would notice, but no one ever did. We sat in silence for a few minutes. The rain tapped gently against the windows. Finally, Evan whispered, "Can I stay here, just for tonight?" The desperation in his voice hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him he could stay somewhere warm and safe forever, but I wasn't his guardian. I wasn't trained to help in situations like this, and yet, calling the police felt wrong, cold, impersonal. "Evan," I said, choosing each word carefully, "I'm not going to leave you, but we need someone who can make sure you're safe." his face contorted not in anger, but fear. He grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles white. "Please don't send me back." My breath caught. "Hey," I said gently, "I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you. I promise. But we need a grown-up who knows more than I do about what to do next." It took 10 more minutes of gentle reassurance before he finally agreed that we could call someone. Not the cops, not his parents. "Someone safe," he whispered. And so, for the first time in my life, I called Child Protective Services. A woman with a warm voice said she would be there within half an hour. Evan sat beside me, shaking. I kept telling him he was safe, that I wouldn't leave. He didn't seem convinced. When the caseworker arrived, a woman named Sarah Von Sphere returned full force. He pressed himself against my side. She knelt down and spoke softly, explaining who she was, but he didn't loosen his grip on me. "It's okay," I murmured. "She's here to help." His hand tightened around mine anyway. Sarah gave me a small nod, understanding. "He trusts you," she said quietly. "Sometimes that's the only thing that gets them through the first night." We walked outside to her car. Evan's fingers dug into my sleeve. "Will I see you again?" he whispered. The question caught me off guard. "If you want to," I said. He nodded. I helped him into the back seat. He leaned forward as Sarah closed the door, eyes locked on mine until the last second. As the car pulled away, I stood under the glow of a rain mist clinging to my jacket, wondering why this childish stranger felt like a mirror of a person I had buried long ago. For hours after I got home, I couldn't shake the image of him, the fear, the loneliness, the way he looked at me as if I was the only person keeping him from disappearing completely. Something inside me twisted painfully a memory I had boarded up long ago. When I was 8, I had also run away once. I had also sat alone on a curb in the rain, and I had also waited for someone to notice. No one ever did. Until tonight, I hadn't realized how much that had shaped me. I hadn't realized how deeply that wound still echoed, and I didn't yet know that helping Evan would force me to face the one part of my past I had never dared to, confront the part tied to the father who never came looking for me. But I was about to. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan soaked, trembling, his small fingers wrapped tightly around mine, as if letting go meant falling into a darkness too deep to escape. By morning, the city felt quieter, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I made coffee, paced my apartment, stared at the rain-stained window. Something in me felt unsettled, like an old door inside my chest had been forced open, revealing a room filled with memories I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. The image that lingered most was not Evan sitting alone in the rain, nor even the fear in his eyes. It was the way he looked at me right before the car door shut, a look of fragile trust, almost disbelief that someone had chosen to stay. That look haunted me because I knew it. I knew it from the inside out. It was the same look I had once given someone, and the same look that, when unanswered, had taught me the wrong lessons about the world. I tried to work, but couldn't focus. Everything felt muted, unimportant. Eventually, I grabbed my keys and drove to the CPS building. I didn't know if it was allowed, didn't know if I'd even be let inside, but something in me needed to see if Evan was okay. When I walked through the sliding doors, a woman at the front desk asked if she could help me. I explained who I was, unsure if I sounded desperate or foolish. Before she could answer, I heard a familiar voice. "Mark." I turned. It was Sarah, the caseworker from the night before. "I was just about to call you," she said. My pulse quickened. "Is he all right?" She nodded. "He's safe, tired, a little overwhelmed, but safe." Relief washed through me so strongly my knees wobbled. "Can I see him?" I asked. Sarah studied my face for a moment, as if measuring something invisible. "Normally, we don't allow visits this early," she said gently. "But he asked for you." Those words hit harder than I expected. She led me down a hallway to a small room furnished with child-sized chairs and toys that looked barely used. Evan was sitting at a table, drawing with dull crayons. When he lifted his head and saw me, his entire expression changed like a light turning on inside a dim room. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair, and rushed toward me. Instinctively, I knelt and caught him as he threw his arms around my neck. "You came back," he whispered. I squeezed him gently. "Of course I did." We sat together while he finished his drawing, a sun this time, bright and round, hanging above a little house. "Is this where you want to live?" I asked softly. He shrugged. "Maybe, Sarah explained that Evan would be placed in emergency foster care while they investigated his home situation. The word investigated made me tense, imagining all the possibilities, but I reminded myself that he was safe for now, and that was what mattered. Before I left, Evan reached into his backpack, the same one he'd clung to last night. Tan pulled out a small folded paper. He placed it in my hand. "For you," he said. I unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, 2 figures holding hands under an umbrella, one tall, one small. Rain fell all around, but the umbrella kept them dry. I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'll keep it." As I drove home, the drawing lay on the passenger seat, catching the morning light, and I realized something painful. Helping Evan wasn't just about him. It was about me, about a version of myself I had long abandoned. That realization terrified me more than anything. 2 days passed before I saw Evan again. The foster family he'd been placed with, Linda and Rob, lived in a quiet neighborhood with large oak trees and houses that all looked like they were built in the same year. When I arrived, Evan was outside in the backyard, tossing a tennis ball against the fence. He ran to me the moment he saw me, slipping his hand into mine as if it belonged there. Linda invited me in, offering lemonade, telling me how Evan had slept through the night, how he had eaten 2 waffles that morning, how he seemed lighter. I thanked her, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. Evan tugged at my sleeve. "Come see my room," he said. It was small, neatly arranged, with fresh sheets and a few donated toys. But on the nightstand was something that froze me. A picture from the drawing he gave me. A small printout of 2 figures under an umbrella. He had taped it up himself. "Did you draw this again?" I asked. He shook his head. "I traced it," he said proudly, "so I don't forget." Those words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. When I left that day, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, because once again, I remembered something I had spent years burying, something that tied me to Evan more deeply than I had admitted even to myself. When I was 10, I had been placed in a foster home for a short time. My father had been drinking heavily. My mother had been gone for days. A neighbor had called the police. I remembered being taken away. I remembered sitting in a strange room with cartoon wallpaper, waiting for someone who never came. I remembered drawing a picture of myself standing under a streetlight, hoping someone would find me. And now, decades later, fate had brought me to a child who stood under a streetlight waiting for someone to find him. The symmetry was painful and healing. Weeks passed. I visited Evan often, sometimes twice a week, sometimes just long enough to listen to him talk about school or show me his newest drawing. His foster parents said he opened up more with me than with anyone else. CPS began talking about long-term placement. Every day, the idea tugged at me. Should I apply to be his guardian? Was I capable of being the person he needed, or was I just filling a void inside myself? One afternoon, while Evan and I built a lopsided Lego house on the living room carpet, he asked a question that made my heart stop. "Mark," he said, turning a red brick in his hand, "why didn't your dad come back for you?" The air left my lungs. "Who told you? You said once you knew what it felt like," he interrupted softly. "To wait." I looked at him. His eyes were gentle, curious, not accusing. I swallowed. "My dad, he wasn't well," I said. "He didn't know how to take care of himself. And people who don't know how to take care of themselves, they usually can't take care of kids." Evan nodded slowly, thinking, "Do you think he wanted to come back?" I felt tears sting the backs of my eyes. I think he wanted to be someone better. He just didn't know how." Silence settled between us. Then Evan placed a Lego brick on the house roof and whispered, "I hope my dad wants to be better too." That moment broke something inside me and rebuilt something else. 3 months after the night I found him in the rain, CPS called me. "His case is moving toward permanent placement," Sarah said. My throat tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "that if you're considering long-term involvement in his life, now would be the time to decide." I looked at the drawing taped to my refrigerator, the umbrella, the 2 figures, the rain falling around them. I thought about the boy who traced that picture so he wouldn't forget. I thought about the child I used to be, sitting under a different rain, waiting for someone who never showed. And I realized I had been given a chance, something rare, something fragile to break a cycle. The next day, I drove to Evan's foster home. He ran to me as always, arms wrapping around my waist. Linda smiled at me, knowing something had shifted. "Can we talk privately?" I asked. She nodded. Evan and I sat on the porch steps. "Evan," I said slowly, How would you feel if we didn't just see each other sometimes? What if you lived with me? His head snapped up. His eyes widened. Really? I nodded. Only if you want to. Only if it feels safe. Tears filled his eyes instantly, not the scared kind, but the hopeful kind. The kind I had never seen in him before. He threw his arms around me so hard, I nearly lost my balance. Yes, he whispered over and over. Yes, the adoption process took months, evaluations, interviews, home visits, paperwork, thicker than a dictionary. But every step felt like stitching something together inside me, like mending an old tear that had been ignored too long. And finally, on a warm spring afternoon, a judge smiled and read aloud the words that officially placed Evan in my care. He ran to me in the courthouse hallway, jumping into my arms. "We're a family now," he said. I held him close, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Yeah," I whispered, voice shaking. "We really are." That night, after he fell asleep in his new room painted blue, with star decals on the ceiling, I sat in the hallway floor outside his door. I listened to his quiet breathing, steady and safe, and felt something inside me settle into place, a piece of myself I didn't know had been missing. Evan didn't just need me, I needed him. Maybe that's how fate works. Maybe the universe puts broken people in each other's paths at the exact moment they're meant to heal. And sometimes healing looks like a grown man kneeling in the rain beside a child who reminds him of everything he once needed.